Evening, everybody. We are ready for some Cyberpunk tonight. I'm gonna be so. It feels a little weird to be doing Hellblade or to be doing Cyberpunk after Hellblade 2. I have had a wonderful time with Hellblade 2, but I figure it doesn't hurt to have a little more consistency in terms of the games that we're doing. So we will be returning to Cyberpunk. My expectation is that we will probably be doing more of the fixers' jobs. However, we are getting to the point where most of them are at sort of the top tier, hence the title Fixer's Pet. And if the mood takes me, we'll definitely do some more main quest material. But I don't know. I I hear there is a thing about the Witcher 3 that says sort of there aren't really any sort of fluff side quests, that all of them seem to have something that makes them special. And it's always kind of tricky to deal with sayings like that. I sometimes feel that because I don't play a lot of big releases on release, in fact Cyberpunk is one of the exceptions in this case, it's tricky to find out. Like, I sometimes feel that they're penalized a little bit just because there is a mainstream opinion about them, and if it's excuse me, negative, I probably won't play it because that's how people do. There'll be exceptions, right? So Civilization, I'm pretty much always going to play on my own, and I actually don't really have a problem with Civilization 7. I will say, for revealed preferences, I sort of dropped off playing it for a little bit, but I think I could make the same claim about Civilization 6, if I'm honest, and I think that's more of a function of me working rather than the merits of the game itself. But yeah, so whenever it comes to something, so if usually it'll be very positive, and a little bit like if people are really insisting that you need to watch a TV show that they're into, it may be a great show, but it would be, there can be a level of insistence that you are doomed to wonder what the big deal was when you finally get around to it. So I'm not sure how much the Witcher reputation will stick for me, just because there's now this expectation that every piece of mail that I deliver will get me thinking about the human condition or something like that, which is clearly not a good standard to be holding any game to, let alone one that's by any measure a genuinely good one like The Witcher 3. But in any case, it's the teams that made it aren't that. I know there was a lot of turnaround at CD Projekt Red, so it's not to say that it's the exact same team, but there is something of the DNA there, and I think it's fair to say that some of the side quests do have their own nice little spin. So they're certainly not a hardship to do, which is why I feel okay running through them. Now, obviously, I'm starting at a later time, as is kind of tradition for Fridays at this point. I do intend to go all the way through, but we'll see how the evening goes. If things get a little quiet, or hey, Underwater Monk, how you doing tonight? If things get a little quieter, if I'm feeling worn out, I do still have a bit of work stuff to do, but I was so happy. I sort of set for myself to do my performance, my review is next week, but like for all of the stuff that I needed to do, like the self-aggrandizing document that constitutes my contribution to the performance review, I sort of made that my last thing that I did on my big pile of work. Yeah, no worries. I don't take attendance. Happy to have you here. But yeah, there's I definitely cleared through a bunch of the backlog. I'm gonna have a little bit to do over the weekend, or possibly. Oh, interesting. Sorry, I shouldn't be checking my phone while I'm doing this. The news keeps running in, but yeah. So I or is it? What was this gonna say? Yeah, I intend to kind of do a full stream, but I do have a little bit of work to catch up on the weekend, just in terms of some learning. if I get a chance to maybe do a little bit of that at the end of the stream, I'll take the opportunity. But, you know, just like work, I want to focus on work. Stream, I want to focus on stream. So I don't have any intentions to wrap it up early unless, you know, unless we find a good opportunity to do so.
Introducing Alois Decan, a deadbeat with a pretentious name. Gonk broke my trust and skipped town. Well, fuck him. Only thing I care about now is the data he left in NC. Specifically, what's on his comp. Check the attachment, you'll see what to do.
I can't possibly see any way that would go wrong. Thievery steal, Awa Dukan's laptop, housing block on Eisenhower Street, Awa Dukan, Corporal Mega Prick who cheated me. And not only me, there's a whole city out there that wants to get their hands on this guy. As they say, the fate of a traitor is sealed at the time of his betrayal. What interests me beyond my vengeance is Elwa's datapad and, well, the data on it. Our traitor picked up and fucked off right out of NC so fast he left his gear in town. Just 20 minutes ago, I got a login ping from his comp on an Eisenhower Street local net. Head over there and grab his device. Once we get it, we can take advantage of this confused mess. I also walked right into that guy. Alright, so my best bet here would just be to ping. Yeah. Oh. They seemed relatively static until I started actually moving around myself. But this is a pretty simple one. Yuck, yuck, yuck. I'm pretty sure these are scavs. Yep. So I'm pretty sure this last guy might be in a brain dance. Nope, nope. He wouldn't be. All right. So let's try and get a couple of toys before we go on to the mission. I would have thought, just looking down below here, I would have thought that there'd be an area for me to go underneath, but it seems like I'm wrong. So I'll clean out this little spot first. Kabuki hit from A. Liptov to M. Figashevsky. Two merc cunts hit our place in Kabuki. Came for Dorset and walked out over my brother's back. Asked the neighbors, and they say it was a big Tino and a young poser piece of shit. You know anyone in the afterlife? Ask around. I want names. This isn't over. So this is me. New record, motherfucker, from M. Figashevsky to V. Trakev. Remember our old bet? Well, I beat your record. 260 pounds of chrome ripped out of one guy. Some techie coming off his shift in Arroyo. Every step he took left a fucking crater in the sidewalk. He was so heavy. Well, I put a stop to that, good citizen that I am. Don't want him trashing our infrastructure. Ha ha ha. And that means you owe me a cold one. Let me know when you want to hit the bars. Obviously, I don't need to take this much time to sneak around this particular level, but I want my goodies. I don't think I saw that note before saying that, or indicating that these guys were somehow related to the people from the prologue or tutorial mission. So I'm curious if they're going to make a little bit more out of that. Death of Mercenary, author unknown. Quick enough, not I, nor bold, nor enough, nor agile, tangled up in wires like a nest of vipers vile. Was it I who fell, or was it done to me? Dissolving, disappearing, with you I wish to be. Now tethered, clamoring, the restless swarm, beating in my ears a pale rage. No! Into the earth I seep, my life the sweet, thorn sticks in my throat. A chill burns brighter. On. To the end? What a thought, a huddled husk, I tumble for the dawn. The old certainty of youth is felled, and from its gnarled trunk memories fall forth. Hours of hours, sharp and pressing race, embittered in a power-locked embrace. With you I wish to be, and so I go, down a road without end, through woods half-dreamt. And the chill-bleached delirium of desire flies into trepid trembling sand. Through the fog, your shadow sharpening, the storm tangles in me once again, to sway with you like sweet grasses dry. Still the glassy dust will not but rise. Operation Carpe Noctem encrypted. Okay. Oh, I'll copy that malware. So 55 1CFF 55. Okay, and we'll see if we can recover the BDE9. For Night Corp internal use only, the tests have come back successful. The artificial intelligence, CN07, has proven itself capable of bypassing commercial, device-specific, and macro-security systems accessible to Night Corp employees of the lowest ranks. None of the test subjects were aware that this experiment was being conducted on them. In compliance with the orders it was given, CN07 focused mostly on subject HK13, which at the time of the experiment's commencement was classified as calm and empathetic. After a period of subliminal conditioning, as we predicted, HK13 began to display acute psychopathic behavior. The highlight was a dispute over coffee, during which HK13 strangled one of their colleagues, then jumped out of the 16th floor window of the research facility. We will soon commence the next phase of the procedure and install CN07 onto the devices of our actual target. I wonder if this is related to the politicians mission. Same thing happens to you when you need to work with AI. Do you have to do AI at work, or I guess it doesn't have to be work, but do you have a situation in which its use is mandated? I know, what is it? Shopify had that rather notorious memo. I kind of realize there's a cost that or there's a price that I pay every time I talk about AI on here, but I don't know. I feel particularly when it's something like Cyberpunk, you know, to not talk about it feel well. Okay, there's two things about it that I would say. Well, one, not talking about it in Cyberpunk feels kind of like it's missing the point, and then not talking about it because you're scared that like people will say mean things or they'll not like you doesn't seem very punk. So it's you know, damned both, not both, doubly damned. Oh yeah. So I mean, it was a long thing that I did, but at the end of one of the streams, and again, so I think there's something to be said for there's two specific examples that I can give, and this is a little tedious because I have talked about this before, but maybe just for the benefit, so I don't sound like I've got a massive persecution complex. So on one of these streams, I had shared something that I did with Copilot with a friend who was interested in writing. And I'm somewhat skeptical in terms of AI, but not in a I don't think it can find any use camp. I think it's more I am resistant to some of the more extravagant claims being made about it. But I think my position has been I should keep on top of the tech. I feel like should use it every once in a while to see what it can do, and then just maybe keep track of cases where I don't think it's been very helpful and don't use it for that. But on the other hand, treat it like any other tool, which is, find something that may be helpful. And I have actually found a couple of things where I'm like, I could see myself making this as part of a production process, let's say. So for a writer friend, I actually thought, like, this is one of the big ones that I find an interesting challenge, right? Because to a certain extent, people are worried, oh no, it will replace human creativity. And I'm like, not really. I mean, like, I write, right? So any hope that I may have had of being a paid writer vanished with BuzzFeed. If you want something that's making like mindless, audience optimized drivel, there's plenty of websites that do that. I'm not convinced that, the AI is the thing that's really killing writing. In fact, there's lots of very good writing happening too. Like I don't want to sound like one of those people either. But there is something kind of interesting, right? In one sense, because everybody feels so strongly on that one, it's an area where people aren't necessarily looking. But it's also an interesting challenge because it isn't necessarily one of those things that works really well. So for instance, if I sit down, sorry, I'm just going to adjust my blanket. If I try to just sit down and get a model like Copilot to try and write a story, I'm usually not happy with it. Like, I just don't find it a very interesting story. I don't really like the writing style of Copilot, or any LLM for that matter. And that's fine because I happen to like writing. So, even I've tried, it's gotten a little bit better, I've noticed actually, but I've tried to have it be sort of an editor for articles that I wrote. And the problem is that they really let a lot of howlers sort of still run through. So that wasn't really working for that either. But again, it's one of these things. And actually one experiment I tried to do at the risk of potentially shattering my ego was I asked it to write on the same subject so that I can compare it against mine. And like, as far as I'm concerned, I may not be a great writer, but I kicked that thing's ass. Like, I definitely had a much more interesting article. I can actually do the comparison if you care to see it, but this is where the penalty came in. So creative writing is the big question. But I did in an earlier stream pose the question of what might a Soviet cyberpunk look like. And I've got some bits of history that I think would actually be interesting and relevant to that. But before I went too far in it, I decided that it might be interesting to do a slightly different experiment, and that is to see how far I could get with an AI in developing that idea. And it did actually have a couple of, so it came up with a genre named Red Punk, which I really liked. And I kind of tried to, it was a very, very long exchange that I had with it. It's like probably 30 or 40 pages or something like that in a Word doc. And it's like, not all of it is very helpful, but what I wanted to kind of do at the end of it, particularly because I've had some conversations with this friend who's getting into writing and, has been wondering about the overstated claims on AI. I was kind of interested in showing them what I thought was a fairly interesting little exchange, and where I thought there was a nice clear delineation in terms of where the human had a useful role to play, while also sort of preserving the thing that I think people who like to write like the most. So in any case, at the end of Cyberpunk, I spent a really long time doing it actually. But because I think the title was something, using AI to augment creativity or something like that. There are people who'd followed the channel for years, coming in saying it's like, this title has to be clickbait, right? Nope. And it's no further question. Immediate unfollow to the channel. The one that actually upset me a little bit more, though, like not deeply, but it's just one of these ones where I'm like, okay, you know what? I held my tongue on a bunch of stuff, and I'm really mad that I did now, because these were clearly people who did not merit the treatment, let's say. There was a publication that was basically, they were sort of soliciting, it was going to be like a magazine for the Playdate when it came out, and they sort of solicited articles, and one of my proposals had come in, so they're sort of like, there's not going to be a lot of money on this, but we'll pay you a small honorarium, and you get to be part of this publication. So I'm like, okay, that works. Part of it's just getting the word out on something that I haven't done on my own. So put together an article. Wasn't 100% what I wanted because of the word limit, and there's a couple of editing rounds where I was like, okay, I'm not crazy about these changes, but I largely assent to them, and nobody's gonna be, oh yeah, I'm so happy the editor did that. Well, actually no, there are some really good editors, I should say, but anyway, so just standard experience. And the thing sort of runs behind. It's okay, these things happen. It was nice to have been asked or whatever. But I do eventually get a series of rather insistent emails that I submit some kind of a photo for an author bio. So, because I have my day job and such, I I don't want to sound like a martyr or anything like that, but what I decided to do was, there was an artist I knew lives entirely off of their commissions, and their commissions are quite low, and they also don't get a lot of commissions, so they're not exactly flush with cash. And so I thought a nice thing to do would be sort of take the majority of the honorarium that I would get, and pay for this this sort of stylized portrait, and give that as part of the article, right? Pass on the good fortune. So the Playdate's been out for a while. This publication is not out. Okay, fair enough. I'm out the honorarium. That's a little annoying, but lesson learned. Carry on. But I'm a member of this person's community too, and they do have a sort of share your work section. So when there's a share your work section, I'll usually put out my article, and you'll notice that on the recommendation of a game developer, actually, they said, it's usually better if you have a photo for your, the things that you want engagement. You can put that up on your blogs. And I'm like, okay, I usually prefer having an image if I think an image is suitable, but fair enough, that's not hard to do. And so I, do a little Copilot image that has maybe tenuous relations to the subject. So one of these articles that I was doing was sort of resurrecting old dead discourse. So one of the efforts to just sort of sell people on the lameness was just a simple, very generic looking AI made necromancer image with MS Paint arrows pointing, here is the discourse, here is me, kind of coming clean about the fact that it was a bit of a stale topic. Just a complete throwaway little image to fulfill the SEO requirements. So someone in the, and of course it's always the just be kind communities, right? Someone proceeds to write several paragraphs just trashing this image as obviously AI generated and therefore bad. And then, after a while of this, because my Discords just get, every once in a while I'm hearing beep, 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 Discord just keeps going and going. So I finally say, perhaps we could focus on the substance of the article. I was like, I'm still reading it. And then, again, then another person comes in and goes trashing the image. And I checked, right? There's no requirement, nothing about not sharing AI art or anything like that. just, I've shown myself as one of the bad thinkers, one of the people who uses the forbidden technology, and therefore, the appropriate subject of scorn. So eventually the guy intervenes to tell me that while there was no explicit rule against AI, I will be given the opportunity to remove the image and resubmit it. And I think the thing that really pissed me off about this was that out of all of the people in this situation who has actually paid an artist for their work, I am the only one to have done so. So again, a small price to pay because these are clearly not people I should really be spending all that much time with. But yeah, no, it is one of these things where, I think there is a very irrational dislike of the tech. Now, there's a lot of things that you can be unhappy about with it. Oh yeah, and then there are some really great people in the local game dev community, but there's clearly someone who has decided to take me very personally. And that has actually made it considerably more difficult to be involved in it. But I don't know, it's like any kind of bully, right? You really do not want people like that dictating who stays and who goes, because then you're going to wake up and find out that you're in maybe not such a nice environment anymore. So that one I'm kind of trying to stick to my guns on. But long story short, it's a topic that whenever it comes up, it's actually one that tends to bring out the worst in people, I found. And I actually think that there's probably reason for people to say what they dislike about the tech. I think there's room for disagreement on it, but I really don't think this channel of all places, right? I really don't think this is the kind of place where you can just take, some off the shelf, oh, don't you know the carbon emissions? Yeah, I also know the carbon emissions of my, PC running this game, doing this stream, right? These are the sorts of things where I sort of feel like if you're going to have the conversation, have the conversation. And if, on the other hand, this just happens to be the topic in which you have social license to be a bully to someone, maybe just do that somewhere else. So, but yeah, now I've drugged the the channel down into another AI rant. And again, the funny thing is like, I get nasty comments on YouTube every once in a while on it, and it's usually just along the lines of saying that, I'm wasting people's time with it. And the exchange on the writing thing did wind up going longer than I thought, but I was very pleasantly surprised at the some of the images and the cinematic style that the AI came up with. And then the funny thing is, all of the people who left in a huff, actually, once it got to the time where it was writing a narrative, it completely failed to engage with the setting that, we'd previously discussed. And that was kind of the part where I said, this is really where you need to start taking control again. Otherwise, this is just not going to be good. But again, right, if somebody wants to get mad about something, they're gonna get mad. So it didn't carry on. By the way, I have been so I was thinking something like BD1C, and then I could do like a BD1C. The challenge there is if I do 55 7A, I don't have another 55 left. So try this again. So BD. So I could try BD1. BD. No, I'd have to start with 1C. So 1C, BD, 1C, 55. Okay. Your supervisor loves to have us run our reports through Copilot, which makes up errors and suggests nonsense to add. Sorry, I didn't see that part before. That is a shame. One of the things that I do think is I don't have a lot of opinions on Shopify, if I'm honest, but there is something kind of intriguing about the mandate at Shopify to like the expectation that AI is being used, because I think one factor that's interesting about that is it is one of the clearest ways to overcome any resistance that people might have about the tech. Right? If your boss tells you to do the thing, you do the thing. Usually, in most workplaces, and so that means that's just the next step to that is okay. I have to use this tech, so because I have to use this tech, how do I use this in a way that doesn't make me sad? Which is roughly where I sort of am in terms of how I try to engage with Copilot. So I think there's something kind of interesting about creating an environment in which, the natural resistance might be sort of overcome by the fact that there's sort of a mandate or an expectation. But I think the big challenge with it is that it's can turn into a little bit of an overcorrection in the other. Ooh, this might get interesting. Okay, you have sealed your fate, my friend. The challenge, of course, is that, to keep the boss happy, you're just going to do any old nonsense. And, at that point, it's a really bad use of the technology. So there is kind of an implicit assumption that there is some good use that can be found in the workplace for it. Which, I don't know, I feel isn't that controversial of a position. But yeah, well, that's the big one for me, Underwater Monk. Like, I think the problem is that a lot of times I've tried to use it, it has not been very helpful. I have found, however, the more I experiment, the more I get to those points where I'm like, okay, actually, that was kind of interesting what it just did there. So I am kind of optimistic in the grand scheme of things. Now, in terms of how other workplaces go through it, I don't know. Everybody's going to have to kind of figure that out for themselves. But yeah, I mean, I primarily, like, at work, a lot of what I've been doing lately has been writing. And I know there's been a bit of an effort to see if you can get the AI to do the writing. And it just, like, I could have told you it wasn't going to replace me. Like, maybe one day, right? But there is something very specific about the type of writing that I do. I mean, the funny thing too is I'm normally like an economist, so even then the writing part wouldn't necessarily be the main focus, except that it just lately the most useful thing I can do at work is sort of put words to paper. So if he turns around, I'll just blast him. But yeah, no, there's definitely, for me at least, I've crossed the point where I couldn't say that there's, I've crossed the point where I couldn't articulate anything but sort of a trivial or sort of like a gamey use for it. But I will also say I'm sort of falling short of the, this is like having a junior programmer for me or something like that.
Who would have thought?
Corpo or not, without Chrome, we all look like the same idiotic, bullet-ridden sacks of meat.
Hey, where'd you come from?
It was just downstairs. You want to talk about this?
I don't know what you saw there. I don't go down there. I don't know anything. They forced me. I'm their hostage. Said if I try to escape, I'd be next on the table. I swear.
You're lying.
It's your right not to believe me. You also have the right to a discount.
Discount? What do you mean?
Special prices for special customers like you. In exchange for...
Forgetting what I saw in the basement?
Yes. Well put. Well said.
Sure, deal. Basement's already forgotten.
Perfect. Glad to agree. Please let me know if you need anything.
I'm not actually going to buy anything. I just wanted to steal the goodies. All right. I guess I don't get to take his lunch.
Oh, you're just gonna... Okay.
I'm trying to remember the last time it's been raining when I played this. I remember the last time it was raining in in the real world. I wound up caught in the caught out in it twice. But I don't know. I know I've commented more than a few times about how it's kind of interesting to see Night City as a bit more sort of a bright, like it's not just Blade Runner over again. There are sort of sunny and bright areas, as well as sort of the night with the rain and the neon.
Exactly the tech I wanted. Thanks. Get closed.
I think what I'll do, maybe just to simplify my inventory a little bit, I don't need to sell just because we've got a couple $100,000 already, but any duplicates I'll start disassembling. Assuming I do have duplicates. We did take out a couple people. Okay, so Ajax. It's the lesser Ajax. Maybe that's the Soviet cyberpunk aesthetic, sunny and bright with a welcoming veneer over brutal inhuman systems, modern day real life California, basically. Yeah, so the image, it's funny because this is one of the rare cases where the LLM produced something kind of that I had in mind, but you're going to have the monumental sort of brutalist architecture with red neon sort of contrasted against snow. So like the big one for me is that the parallel that you have, and of course it's got to be red neon, right? But like the idea would be that the parallel to the kind of the constantly rainy streets that we're so familiar with in Cyberpunk would of course be the snow that you might expect in Russia. So obviously that's not the main focus. The main focus that I kind of went on was to think a little bit more about some of the specific technological changes. So like there was a Soviet, basically internet, but it wasn't called that, program called OGAS. And one of the original ways that I sort of got interested in some of this stuff was because I'm a super cool guy, I was looking up ternary systems. So like there's for ternary logic, there's like balanced ternary, which would be, so I think most people are familiar with binary, right? You've got zeros and ones. Ternary systems would have 3 parts. I should probably find another place to go while I'm talking about old computer models. So yeah, ternary systems will have 3 points. So I guess one of the insights of computer science, if it isn't clear, yeah, base 3. So you can actually do computation in any base. But yeah, clearly we have a system that works in base 2. I don't think I have a good way. I mean, maybe I can try. All right, well. Okay, that wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but I might be able to make this work. Yeah, so there's a few different there's actually a few different forms that it can take. So there are some which will do sort of 0, 1, and 2, but then there's other forms which actually go, and this would be balanced ternary, go sort of -1, 0, and 1. And again, it doesn't matter as much which one you go for, but I believe the Seton, which was this is a Soviet machine, used a balanced ternary system. And if you look at the Wikipedia article on it, it actually goes so far as to say that it performed considerably better than the binary system that replaced it, and cost half as much. So that's communism for you. But yeah, I mean, so, you know, I was looking at ternary systems. I'm kind of into formal logic, and, you know, that's not too far away from looking at, you know, different ways of representing things on computers, apparently. So there's like a theoretical benefit, which is kind of a neat one. So there's like this saying that God counts in E, like Euler's number. And if you consider between, so, you know, 2.7, you know, you can see that that's between 2 and 3, but it's closer to 3 than 2. You know, any base that you have, well, any computing system that you have is going to use integers. So there's sort of this nice property that, you know, base 3 is a little bit closer to that magic E number. And then there's something to be said for how much sort of information you can kind of compact even in a base 3 system. But apparently there is a fairly significant technological drawback to it, which is the idea of sort of maintaining this clear signal between the 3, right? The -1, the 0, and the 1. That is apparently a fairly substantial challenge, and I'm by no means an electrical engineer, but in terms of sort of having a technology take off, I also imagine that is one that you largely need to solve each time you do an improvement to the system. So, you know, it's not just enough. Clearly, the Soviets were able to build a functioning ternary computer, and there have been other ones. I actually think there was a Canadian one built at some point. But, you know, the Americans were dominant in terms of computing, and obviously if you have a technology that everybody else is using, there's network effects, and so clearly, binary is going to be dominant, and anybody who wants to introduce a ternary computer now effectively has to make it compatible with all the existing binary stuff, right? Where we just have such a path dependency on this other way of computing. And it's not to suggest that there can't be improvements, right? We had a world in which GPUs weren't really a thing, and now they're driving some of the biggest advances that we're seeing in terms of computing. But for the most part, you kind of need to work inside the existing paradigm, or demonstrate such a huge benefit over the alternative that people are sort of willing to put in that investment to be able to overcome the initial hurdle, or kind of the initial build up to make it viable. Presumably this is going to be something quantum needs to do, right? It's not just enough that quantum needs to demonstrate an ability to do a certain type of computation better. It needs to do it better in such a way that you can justify moving from one way of doing things in a set of infrastructure to another. And then, of course, companies like Microsoft are investing quite a bit to be able to make, this is kind of what Windows is, right? It's like a big API on which you can build all of your applications. Well, likewise, they're doing their quantum work and trying to make it so that they're the ones that you choose when you want to build some sort of application. But in any case, I imagine one of the big challenges because of that difficulty in sort of getting that clean signal is that each advancement, right, when you want to shrink it down, you're going to have to not only do that, now solve that problem again, but you're going to have to solve a harder version of that problem, which would potentially mean that the progress is slower. Now, arguably, you can say, yes, but, the more powerful computer or more efficient computer or whatever, you can use that to design a better one. And so you have a little bit of a flywheel that happens. Again, if it's fiction, you justify it any old way, right? The time machine does take some time to explain how the time machine works, but it doesn't give you the full instructions for making an actual functioning time machine. So, you could just say, yeah, the Saturn took off, or the Soviets won, and for whatever reason, they decided to keep base 3 computers, and so now the world's full of base 3 computers. But yeah, anyways, I read about the Saturn originally because I was interested in ternary systems. It was actually specifically for coordinate systems, but obviously works for logic, or for any kind of base 3 that you want. One thing leads to another, and I learned about the OGAS and the sort of this nascent Soviet internet, which kind of fell apart because everybody was a little too concerned about their particular niche. They didn't want to be undermined by it, but at least in terms of advisors to President Kennedy actually highlighted it as an economic threat to the United States. But in any case, right, all this sort of stuff that could make for sort of like a fun alternate history, and and an interesting spin on the on the cyberpunk genre, because the original impetus behind this little thought experiment was that you have a critique of capitalism in standard cyberpunk, but it's not a Marxist critique. And so likewise, you could imagine in some sort of alternate history in which the Soviet Union at least survived the Cold War and developed a cyberpunk genre of its own, you might see a critique of capitalism, but it wouldn't necessarily be the one that you see inside of something like Neuromancer. And then sort of from there, and of course, that on its own can be a really fun little experiment, because of course then you can just read lots of excellent Russian literature, and there's some great Russian science fiction, for instance. There's a big video game called Stalker 2, which was has sort of a distant descendant from Roadside Picnic by the Strugatsky brothers. But yeah, there's lots of fun that you can have with that idea, just to roll it around in your head. But because there's already a bunch of sort of cyberpunk offshoots, right? So there's like solar punk or diesel punk or steampunk. What you have inside of those are the economic engine is sort of inside the title. And so I think that's something kind of fun about the idea of red punk, right? Because the theory here is that the engine of economic progress is the command economy, which clearly didn't turn out in history for reasons that, you know, I don't want to do too much of an economics history lesson, but yeah, you know, it's one where, you know, it can be a fun what if and lend itself to what I think are very interesting visuals. It can give you just enough. So it's actually, I'd put it to you this way. There's a book called The Hitmakers, and it's got a really interesting theory on what makes a hit. And it's this idea of it, you know, there's the question of novelty, but it's not necessarily avant-garde. It's very familiar, but with just a little twist. And that is effectively, it's a terrible summary of what the book is saying. But basically for them, that is the requirement of a hit, is that it actually needs to be quite familiar. And to me, I just kind of imagine this is the disguise with which you sort of sneak up to the audience with, and then you do something, you do that twist, you do that special move, and that's when you kind of like take the club out from under you and hit them with the weird thing that you're doing. And, you know, you can see this from classical music, where you have, you know, these classical composers going and learning a whole bunch of sort of folk music and putting that into their compositions. And you can see that in a lot of pop. And that's not, you know, some people will always want to play the hipster card, and they won't necessarily, they won't grant any pop some kind of status, but there is actually a lot of very good, very conventional music out there. And for the most part, it follows a certain structure, which is familiar, but it's not a cookie cutter thing. It's familiar enough to have the freedom to do that something special. So likewise, while I'm not exactly looking to do a hit, I do think the idea of sort of red punk, particularly because there's just a whole bunch of neat, history that you can look into if you're interested in it. I think kind of fits in that sense, which is it's kind of like looking into a cyberpunk world, but it looks alien. And I always think there's something kind of exciting about working in a space like that. Although the thing is, it's been a couple of times now that I've talked about this, and I'm obviously excited by it, but the hard work is to actually like write stories in it. And I've been trying to decide if it's appropriate to maybe just try. Short stories are not my strong suit, but I could imagine. I actually had a game idea that would work quite well inside of, but then, you know, making a game is really hard. So do I want to try and, you know, realize this story while also taking on another set of very hard things that I don't know what to do? But then again, writing a story of any length is not an easy thing. So it's all hard. I should just quit and stop streaming and get writing. All right, Takashi and Jotaro. Boss, we tracked down that Ripper. He took out Keiko's tracker, said he didn't know she was one of ours. I don't give a flying turd fuck. Where is she? We'll find her. Ripper says she was here with some choom. Jake, not the black guy with the moth chrome. That one. That fucking lover boy? Yeah, the same. You have to get them. Her and that gonk fuck. Do it so everyone sees. So everyone sees what it's like when a bitch like her tries to skip on Jotaro. What about the Ripper? Teach him a lesson? No, pay him. Any other whore comes to him, tell him to ping us first. Sure, boss. All right, so we'll clear out the last, and then... Keiko and Jake. Okay, let's try. I'm ready to leave. Really? Mean it? I have nothing to lose. Yeah, you can't live that way anymore. When? Today. You get out today. No sense hesitating. Every day we wait is another we risk getting found out. Okay, we'll go to my Ripper. Chuma mine. He'll rip that locator out of you. But whatever you do, don't mention Jotaro or he won't help you. I'll say you're my sis. Okay, then what? We stay at my place for the night, then I help you get out of the city. I'm scared, Jake. This is no place for you. Don't be afraid. This is the right thing to do. Alright. I did not mean to do photo mode. Doesn't seem like there's much left for me up here, so let's head down to this gig. I also haven't been doing too much driving tonight, which is good because I am a menace on the streets. There is something up here, I just don't know if it's worth the trip. I'll learn to live without. It's half a kilometer. I really don't need to drive it, but gives me a chance to have some music. I feel like it could be a little smoother, but maybe to move away from the idea of Cyberpunk specifically, but there is something kind of fun about history. I wish I was more like, so I did do some kind of creative writing for a long time, and then for better or worse, a lot of my effort has been going more towards nonfiction. I'm actually pretty happy with nonfiction, but I realize for some that
got data from Jotaro's private server. Found out who's been procuring people for his recordings. Meet Jay Hume, human trafficker and bona fide piece of shit. Check the sitch out for me. Deeds attached.
Alright, gun for hire, Jaehoon, rooftop slums near Allen Street. Countless dreamers head to big cities in search of a fresh start, and so many of them have nowhere to turn to. Outcasts, loners, rejects, Jaehoon's put targets on the backs of those societies failed, and there's no shortage of them in Night City. Here's a rundown on Jaehoon's meat grinder. He identifies some poor bastard, kidnaps them, and delivers them to scavs for biomon or other cyberware removal. They're stripped of their identities and end up the property of some shitbag like Jotaro to do with as they please. Of course, no one really looks for these people, and even if they did, where would they start? What are the odds to find someone in Night City who doesn't exist? Let's face it, Jaehoon is just one head of the Hydra, but fuck it, let's chop it off anyway. Could be a good while before more grow back in his place. So, you know, one of the things that kind of intrigues me is the idea, you know, if you're going to be making a work of fiction, there is so much history, and so much of it is very, very interesting. To a certain extent, if you find history boring, it may just be an indication of a lack of imagination on your part. Although there's certainly ways of, I think anybody who listens to this channel knows that there are boring ways to present any topic, no matter how exciting it is. I'm going to do Roach Race. I think I actually got every item on that one that time. Definitely took some reckless risks, but... Sorry, Underwater Monk. I'm going to be a little focused on the game right now, but I do commit to reading that as soon as there's a nice little break. Wasn't brave enough to go for that apple. I already had a couple of kind of dodgy calls. Ooh. I think it's partly because I know how close I got previously that I feel a little more precious of these runs than I should. Like the run where I win is not going to be the one where I'm sort of, you know, super focused and white knuckling through it. But where I'm just sort of in the zone and, you know, it feels like out of nowhere all of a sudden I've got this high score, but still, I'm doing it right now. It's worth doing right. Although for some reason I'm really focused on the background. It's maybe an advantage to me that I don't remember. I don't remember how much I need for the high score. No! What was I thinking? All right. I used to dislike writing, but now that you have a job where the focus is on writing, that has to be brief, accurate, down to the word, and completely unambiguous. It turns out that I like writing. Just fine when it's not an essay with a word count or an email to a customer that has to be artificially timid or vague for business reasons. Yeah, I mean, so this is it. Yeah. I'm not going to say writing is for everyone. And that's just largely, like, I can totally get how, even though there's a lot of different styles of writing, it won't necessarily be how people want to express themselves. But I actually think you're really onto something, which is, you know, it's a big enough field, and, you know, when you think of like famous writers or the ones that you'll be assigned in a class or something like that, there does seem to be this kind of density around short stories, right? So even someone like Chekhov, probably better known for his plays, but also, very good short story writer. It does seem to be that is something that a lot of very good writers start off with, and it's easy to see why. Like, it can kind of count as practice almost. Although I've heard in some cases that there are talents who are really they're at their best in terms of short stories. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, I mean, that obviously in terms of like creative writing, that's very, very different from, say, poetry. Right? And poetry can be really rewarding. Poetry also doesn't have to be short, but it would be easy to see, like, it would, if anything, it would be very odd to say to someone who, say, you knew was a poet, and then you came to them and said, it's like, oh, so like, could you write me a screenplay? Maybe they could, but there's the fact that they know how to put the words in the right order and produce a certain effect doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have any ability in that other field. And so I guess as long as you want to try and communicate, like, I guess for me, a lot of this does kind of come down to trying to communicate some kind of an idea. And that's a very, very vague target. Like, and sometimes that idea can just be, spinning a good yarn. But yeah, in terms of trying to sort out an idea, there's like the idea of essay trying in translation. I remember a lot of the first writing that I did was largely to just try and make sense of a lot of stuff that I had been reading. And arguably now I should be reading even more. But that was a style of writing that really worked for me, so I didn't find it a particular hardship not to do as much creative writing as I had previously done. Now, it's something I'd like to get back to, and it's something I'd specifically like to improve my skills at. But, I could also see the reverse happening, right? Somebody who really enjoys writing stories, whether they're novels or, fanfic or whatever makes them happy. I could see how the style of writing that you're describing wouldn't necessarily be very interesting to them. But I think that's kind of the point, is that, there'll be a certain thing that you're told is writing, right? Oh, I didn't realize I was going to jump right back into the game. But sometimes it's just a matter of describing. Actually, it's funny. I'm trying to remember what writer this was, but I think it was somebody who had like read Kafka, and for them, this sounds so funny, but like it was where they'd suddenly learned that you actually had permission to write like that. And I have the benefit of like Kafka being known as, a significant writer, the sort of thing that can be studied. But on my first reaction to that is how silly. Like, of course there's no rules. Of course, you can break the mold. And yet I simultaneously, I guess break the mold means something different, but simultaneously I kind of get it too, because there's a lot of, whether it's a class or your peer group. Like, I remember one of the things I do kind of regret not pursuing at greater length is drawing. So I think I'm a passable photographer now. I think there was a time when I was a good photographer, but I'm definitely out of practice. But there was ooh, this is gonna get tricky. Yeah. I'm not gonna make this all night, but I'm a little determined now. What was I going to say? But yeah, so in terms of writing, or sorry, in terms of drawing, I kind of like drawing rather fantastic images. And there'd been, this is elementary school, so naturally everybody's just going to be horrible to each other. So, somebody's challenging, well, you can't draw. It's like, no, of course I can draw. I love drawing. It's like, well, draw a teacher teaching their class. So I drew like an alien teacher teaching a class of, of alien pupils. This kind of interested me. The other thing I thought was kind of fun about aliens was that, like, I would always find that if I was drawing something and it didn't quite turn out the way that I had in my mind, like, so just the imperfections of being able to translate a shape onto the page, very often I could adapt that into something interesting. And I used to say that maybe my weaknesses as a, in terms of drawing, might have pushed me to photography. But the more I think of it, in terms of photography, often I would like shooting on location because it would often mean having to work against the constraints of, the light available or maybe not the light available, but like whatever light could be managed is not like I'm, working with a full kit and, I've got a generator out back to handle a bunch of lights or something. But saying this now, I kind of realize that it's almost a kind of a reflection of the same tendency, right? Which is there's a set of constraints. Maybe things didn't turn out the way that I wanted them, but how do I find a way of expressing something within those constraints that's appealing? And so in that case, they're actually just, they're just a continuation of the same impulse. But yeah, anyways, one way or another, this is early on before I learned that I actually did not need to give equal weight to what everyone thought of me, but the insistence that was not actually an image of a teacher, they were the ones dictating the rules, and me, naive as I was, realizing that there was never going to be a situation like I could have drawn, some kind of Italian Renaissance masterpiece, and it still would not have, fit the standard, because the point was to cut me down, not to actually evaluate my drawing. But that sort of stuff, I sort of allowed that to kind of discourage me and go away from drawing. So with that in mind, I can take experiences like that and realizing that whether it's your peer group or whether it's, instructors, there's going to be a bunch of people insisting, that they have the definition of the thing. And in some cases, those definitions are not necessarily misguided, right? In an educational context, you do want to make sure that people are learning the lesson. And so that does mean, establishing sort of rights and wrongs. But there are also better and worse ways of doing that. In some cases, you can establish maybe too strong of a set of boundaries. And as a result, again, whether it's the empathy for my, very junior self, just wanting to draw, or, having gone through, I've been pretty lucky in terms of my English instructors. I think for the most part, they were pretty encouraging as far as, taking a certain approach. But yeah, like I guess the long story short of this is that, I do think I kind of understand those accounts of writers who say, you see someone like Kafka or whatever, telling you that you can in fact write this way. There's no one stopping you. And better still, it can actually be very interesting, possibly more interesting than the things that you were told were important and correct. What was I thinking? I was still 1,000 off, but I'll maybe do one more and then we'll move on. I'm learning, however, that this is actually a better game to chat over than main Cyberpunk. But yeah, so it doesn't take that much of a leap to then say, you know, to go from, okay, so, you know, some very good writers have actually needed to see some of the figures that they found influential to sort of quote unquote give them permission to do the thing that we recognize them for. And from there, to say, you know, there's going to be a set of subjects that interest people, and, you know, people who don't conceive of themselves as writers or any other field of, you know, of endeavor, right? May just be waiting for that form that is a little bit more in line with what they want to do. Because I'll confess, right? The same thing that I said about photography and drawing, that's definitely true for writing for me as well. There's a small writers group that I'm involved with, and they decided to do this hot potato exercise. And one of the things for me is, because I don't naturally think to write fiction, I try to make sure I participate in stuff like that so that I can, you know, I can sort of force myself to do some kind of work. Like, you know, it might be bad, but so what, right? At least, oh, shameful. I did say that. Okay, one more. But yeah, so this hot potato exercise, it's sort of, someone writes 500 words and then they pass it. It's allegedly I mean, it might as well be random for the participants. But you pick up the original document, and then you add 500 to it. And I think there's something kind of interesting. Like, I like the idea of that exercise mostly because it's slightly, yeah, okay, the universe is telling me I need to get out of Road Tracer. But yeah, it kind of tells me to, it engages my heavy analytical side to see, to basically see what was written before and handle, you know, handle it, understand where I am in the story, and you know, kind of the expectations and obligations. Oh, that's gonna be a pain. I'm gonna try the pinging. Oh. How frustrating. All right, so I think I'm just gonna have to accept that one's. I'm gonna have to get to that one later. Oh.
That's weird.
All right, you know what? Boring conversation anyway. I love it when I put that much effort into an approach, and then I just do something boneheaded, like not realizing that that's a solid wall that I'm behind. Nyuk, nyuk, nyuk. All right. Interesting. So I don't think this first row lets me do anything, but if I do a 55, 1C, 55... Okay. Oh. I've really blown it now. I think I need to get better at that before I just rush through. Good God, what did I do to this guy? I thought there would be... Oh, there we go. Konstanty Eldefons Gleshinsky, Ballad of Two Sisters. There once were two sisters, Night and Death. Death large and Night small. Night had the beauty of dreams, while Death was most lovely of all. Hey nani nani, hey nani nani, Death was the most lovely of all. Up for grabs, selected for next week, Cindy Lathan, Black 17, Aldecado's Runaway in Night City 1 week. John Kazmarek, White 19, Orphaned from Nevada in Night City 3 days. Sherry Bach, White 24, Kabuki native, orphaned after parents died living on streets. International Cuisine, from Jaehoon to Jotaro Shobo. Good morning, good sir. I'm offering a new dish that should satisfy your sophisticated palate. Include 1 black lamb, 2 pinky porky boys, and, with an Asian twist, young hen and rooster. In total, 5 young up-and-coming stars who are dying to perform in your productions. Important, make sure to apply the cream provided in your package to their biomonitor wounds. It would be a shame if they died in the middle of scrolling because of an infection. Also, I equipped each with a GPS in case any of them try to go out for any long walks. But most importantly, have some fucking fun. As of today, they're your property. P.S. I know you don't like surprises, so I personally double-checked their histories. None have ever fucked professionally, so it's up to you to convince them and break them in how you see fit. I only hope they prove more durable. I can't cook with soft ingredients. We have a problem from Katerina Mielek to Jaehoon. We have a pretty serious complication. That Asian boy reserved for Jotaro had a severe seizure out of nowhere. He's alive but extremely weak. I very much doubt Jotaro will have any interest in one so fragile. I'll exchange him for the boy already marked for downtown, but maybe that throws a wrench into everything. It's your call. Okay, let's do this. We make the change. I'll smooth things over with the corpo downtown as best I can. I'd rather do that than risk blowback from Jotaro. But to the earlier point in terms of, topics for writing. So, you can be someone who is all about, say, fantasy, and that just kind of comes naturally to you. You like, maybe you're inspired by a certain type of story or scenario, maybe like playing Dungeons and Dragons, whatever it is to drive you there. All right, let me just see. 1C, 1C, 7A. Can I get to a BD, though? Okay. All right, well. But you can also see how someone who's into writing that may have no interest whatsoever in history, alternate or otherwise. Now, it's probably a little contrived as an example, just because chances are if you're into the dungeons in D&D, you at least have some kind of interest in, you know, medieval stories. And I mean, let's also be honest, when it comes to these kinds of hobbies, like some of these things seem like they shouldn't be related. Like if you think about it, it's a little weird that science fiction and fantasy are in the same section of the bookstore, other than like they're books that people who have elf ears in their pocket read.
Dead. And here I thought nothing would cheer me up today.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good one, Underwater Monk.
Consider the gig closed.
But yeah, you know, it's on the surface, it's kind of weird that they live in the same place, except for the fact that it really does seem to be that people are into that. You know, so likewise, people who are into D&D probably are also into Star Wars, probably also kind of like history. I'm sure, you know, people who are into that stuff are probably well represented in terms of like the Society of Creative Anachronism, or, you know, go to Renaissance fairs or however you want to. Look at you, V, definitely turning some heads now. Keep up the pace, sending new contract info your way.
See you around.
Bye, V. Remember, the media lies.
Actually, didn't mean to call her. But yeah, you can, regardless of whether or not there's a tendency for people to kind of be into the same stuff, I think it's fair to say that there's a set of topics that will interest people in terms of the kind of creative writing that they want to do. This is independent of the form that it takes, right? Whether they want to write short stories or essays or what have you. And, you know, they may enjoy writing fantasy, but they could not imagine doing, you know, a kind of domestic drama. So I guess I'm talking in terms of movie genres, but, you know, the sort of thing that normally gets put in the literature section. And even within science fiction, right? You know, there's a big difference between the sort of stuff that Philip K. Dick writes and the sort of stuff that, you know, Robert Heinlein writes or Isaac Asimov. Or Douglas Adams, right? You know, you could love The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Well, okay, if you like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and you don't like Foundation, I don't quite know what's wrong with you, but you know, I would say probably, you know, chances are you like Monty Python if you like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and maybe, you know, maybe science fiction isn't your jam so much as just having a nice laugh. But it is kind of interesting to reflect. Like, in one sense, you know, history provides you so much material that can be a really fruitful, fruitful chain of reasoning for a fantasy story, right? Probably you don't need to make it as some kind of an allegory or something like that, but just, you know, being familiar with history and understanding how, you know, how the world has turned out this far. But on the other hand, there is a whole genre of alternate history. Phil K. Dick wrote in it, really well in it, actually.
Yo, V, there's this badge. needs help with his investigation. Guy's known for operating in the gray zone. No scruples about working with mercs. Attach more deeds for you.
Thievery, CCTV footage, Maelstrom warehouse on the corner of Industrial and Eisenhower Street. Client is Aaron McCarson. Our NCPD sergeant used to work for me as a consultant on the show Cops and Chops, 8 seasons, and is asking for a favor. Aaron's been digging into Maelstrom for a while now. Says he found the warehouse where they torture people, but you know how it is for badges. Low slows take him down with mountains of paperwork. So, if they want to get something done, they have to get creative. Aaron knows that, which is why instead of waiting for fat-ass judges to grant him permission, he wants to get help from a contractor. Job simple. Get into the warehouse, coordinates attached, steal the security cam footage, and bring it back to Aaron. Should be enough to push his case through, and if you happen to shoot a few Maelstromers along the way, well, shit happens, right? World wouldn't be worse off without him, that's for sure. Excuse me. Well, hello, sir. I seem to remember having some trouble getting into the building on this one in the previous run. Of course, now I've got my big springy legs, so... I don't think it would hurt for me to do a ping just to get a read on the place. But yeah, so one of the things, and again, I don't always like, well, I can't say I don't like, but I always feel a small hesitation to sort of talk about what interests me, because unfortunately I'm not the type of writer or creative where people sort of ask where the ideas come from. But it is kind of fun to, you know, not like just the same way that I wound up writing a lot of nonfiction to sort of figure out some of the stuff that I had been reading. I think there's something really fun about taking on a subject to write about it specifically so that you can learn more about it. So, you know, if you want to learn, well, you know, the example we had here, right? Maybe for one of you, the idea of red punk, you know, just inspired this fascination with the Soviet Union. And there's lots of different ways. So, you know, is it the early days? So I'm reading A Swim in the Pond in the Rain by George Saunders. So George Saunders is quite a well-regarded short story writer. I think he also has a novel as well. And he is a creative writing teacher at Syracuse University. And like a creative, I think a reasonably prestigious creative writing program. I'm not really in a position to evaluate them, but in it is a collection of short stories, but it has sort of commentary from him, and it's sort of intended to be sort of this book version of his creative writing class to a certain degree. So the book, or the story that it starts with, is In the Cart by Chekhov, who's mentioned earlier. And that one's kind of interesting. I mean, he does actually specifically mention the Russian Revolution only very briefly inside of it. But, you know, one of the things you can think about in the Cart is that it's not that far away from the Russian Revolution. And then, of course, you can kind of imagine how everybody sort of turns out in that story, in that situation. So you may be interested. Now, if you want to go down an alternate history path, well, you know, what happens if the Mensheviks win rather than the Bolsheviks? You might go a little bit later. What happens if Stalin is sort of recognized for who he is? You know, I think probably the big one that a bunch of people would already be interested in is what if Trotsky took over? You know, there's any number of things that you can do, and it may not even necessarily be that you really want to write these alternate histories, but you maybe just want an excuse to read about the Russian Revolution. Maybe you don't want to read about the Russian Revolution. Maybe you want to read about, the space race, and to learn all the details like that. So, for instance, this is a horrible example, but there's the famous dog Laika, who was shot up into space, didn't survive it, wasn't expected to survive it, but there was propaganda about Laika and the conditions under which Laika died. Laika was basically cooked, but that's not what the story was. I think it was basically the 2000s when Laika's actual fate was officially unveiled. So is this it? Like the all the great scientists, all the tremendous engineers of the Soviet Union, coming together to boil a dog in space. This is the monument. This is the thing that spooked the United States. Well, I guess it wasn't the Laika mission, but this is supposed to be the thing that we were so worried about, or our allies were so worried about. Maybe it's there's a whole bunch of history there, which if you're just curious about that, coming up with a story to support it, that's enough. I mean, sometimes it's just worth it to read it on its own, but the idea of writing a story can be a nice way of sort of motivating a particular line of research. And it can work the other way around too. Like sometimes these settings can be interesting vehicles to tell otherwise seemingly normal stories. So I've talked in the past about how I really like The Americans, which I actually haven't seen all the way through. The library doesn't. So they've got a gap. I think they're missing the 3rd season, and I haven't seen the final season. I don't think I've seen the 5th season either. Anyway, I should check where I am on it, but that one's kind of a neat one because it is a Cold War story. So apparently the showrunner actually worked for the CIA, and the origin of that show was him being asked as part of his interview. I'm assuming this is a security interview. Like, are you working for the CIA with the intention of creating, some sort of like a book or movie? And apparently his reaction was like, well, I wasn't, but that actually sounds like kind of a good idea now. But what's fun about The Americans is that it does really work like a standard domestic drama, right? Like, what are mom and dad getting up to behind closed doors? What, the former girlfriend and the now agent comes back into one of the characters' life. Dad has an affair, basically. There's all sorts of, very, I think not everybody's going to have to worry about affairs or whatever in their life. Like, that's still Hollywood stuff. I hope that's just Hollywood stuff. That's very sad if that's not. But there are these things that would be very, very plain in other circumstances. But because it's wrapped up in a late Cold War spy thriller with the illegals, it sort of gets this new life, and it works. Like, it's actually very enjoyable to watch. So, and again, like whether the motivation for that is you just really want to learn about so I don't know, there's something like, once I watched that show, there's something kind of fun about going through the KGB and seeing all the different directorates that they had. So, that can be sort of an inspiration on its own. But like, in some cases, like, I want to tell a story about a family, but I want to tell that story in a way that people who don't normally watch stories about families watch it. And so you get, you get The Americans. Slow Horses, right? We're all familiar with Jean Le Carré. We're all familiar with James Bond. I believe Putin went to work for the KGB because of like a semi-propaganda kind of, the spy people. Like, the spies are a very romanticized kind of profession. So, what makes Slow Horses really interesting? They're fuck-ups. Like, you know, it relies on sort of the premise that, you know, any given workplace is going to have the high performers, and they're going to have, you know, the solid but unexceptional, you know, mass in the middle. And, you know, you're going to have the people who, through nepotism or, you know, hiring policies or, you know, whatever it is, you know, you do not want to put anywhere near serious work. And, you know, that was an idea just waiting to be explored. Anyone had the opportunity to see that. And yet I think to a certain extent, it's kind of like what I sometimes say about funny games, is that we probably have fewer funny games than we should, simply because people like to think of themselves seriously. And so again, if it's possible that we didn't get Slow Horses until later because there were enough spy novelists who wanted to take themselves seriously. But man, am I really glad that Mick Herron, and of course the showrunners, I think it's Will Smith, not that Will Smith, but the British Will Smith, who's showrunner on Slow Horses. You know, we wind up with a really, really entertaining show. Actually, really action-packed one too, if you haven't seen it. All right, I don't know if I can go the whole way, but I'll at least get the basics here. So I can do an E9 1C. Maybe. Nope. Okay. I need to knock that off and smarten up. I'm going to try something really stupid here. Yep. Ah, contagion, damn it. I guess the good news is when you fight Maelstrom, the music's pretty good. Gawker and Miller, the fuck did you do, you quack? What? The paint editor you chip doesn't fucking work. It hurts so bad it makes me want to rip my optics out. When I find you, I'll cut your throat with a fucking scalpel. Try booting up the implant first, then use the run editor command. Okay, yeah, that worked. Sorry. You're welcome. Oh, and your next procedure comes with a negative 100% discount. Okay. I don't even know if this is the best way through. So I can do a 1C55, 1C, I think. Maybe not. Well, I get one free move, so if I do... Well, I gotta make a decision fast. I think I screwed it up. I think the trick is once the timer gets going, I really just need to make a decision. I've lost more to indecision than I have to mistakes. Company is closed, the board. Unfortunately, despite numerous initiatives aimed at reducing our operating guests, including extra commitment from our workers, we have ended this quarter with a loss. In light of these results, bearing in mind the multiple threats of violence from our competitors, the board of directors has decided to liquidate the company's assets. We kindly request that all employees empty out their desks and drawers before 8 p.m., after which we'll hand over the building's keys to its owner. The company's remaining capital will be paid out in dividends to the company's directors. All other employees will receive coupons for selected products in all food stores, equivalent to the value of each employee's weekly salary. Respectfully, the board. Read carefully, Amanda Nelson. A certain corpo entered the net one night when suddenly everything glitched and he encountered a red demon who said, "Tomorrow at midnight you will be dead." The corpo did not place any faith in the threat and slept soundly the night after leaving the net. The next day, he went to work and returned home, and nothing bad happened. But the next morning, his daughter went to wake him up. His optical implants were burned out, his entire body was scorched and cut in half. If you break this email chain, the same thing will happen to you tomorrow at midnight. If you send this to only 3 people, the demon will hurt someone you love. If you send this to 15, the demon will follow you on the net for 5 days and do nothing to you. If you send this to all your contacts, your biggest dream will come true. It's true, it happened to my uncle. Very sorry to send this on to you, but someone sent it to me first. Sounds silly, but forwarding this email will save your life. Of course, the other obvious one to talk about when it comes to sort of settings and that would be Cyberpunk itself. There's obviously a set of ideas that a few different writers. It's obviously not just Mike Pondsmith, although I think probably. I don't know too much about the origin story of this, but I don't think it's just, I sat down and watched Blade Runner and then Cyberpunk came out, or I sat down and read Neuromancer and Cyberpunk came out. I think it was more, there were probably a few people working with a similar set of ideas, and they all kind of came out roughly around the same time, and some of them felt validated by what came out. Others definitely were inspired. So, like, I think I would be shocked if Snow Crash, for instance, was, just coincidentally inspired by, what? Oh, boy. All right. But, it's not that hard to see. Hey, Lord Gloom, how you doing? Yeah, I feel like I was better at them in the previous run, but I don't know. There's enough, there's something about modern big games where it really just seems like you have to have lots of different things to do. And I actually don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Like, it is actually kind of fun to be running around in, like, Roach Racer, for instance. I think I screwed this up. Nope, I'm good. And the hacking... Actually, one thing I really like about hacking minigames will be ones that sort of make you feel like you're solving some kind of a problem, right? You're trying to... Some of them are just a question of trying to feel like you're putting, the pieces, making the pieces fit, putting them in the right place. By the way, I've been bad at doing proper shoutouts lately, so Cyberpunk's a little more forgiving on that front. But yeah, sometimes you're trying to make the pieces fit. Sometimes it feels like you are trying to bend. The ones I like the most are the ones where it sort of makes you feel like you're trying to bend a system to your will. One hacking game that I think does a great job is Exapunks. I think Exapunks has a really, really great way of giving you a simple programming language and a certain way of looking at programs that really reinforces the setting. I think if you want a good Hollywood hacking game, I think Uplink would be a good one. And Night Team 4. Two very different takes on it, but I remember those are two really enjoyable ones.
Yeah. Aaron, it's V. I've got the scrolls.
Oh, V! Thought you were another one of those Serenity Bible whack jobs. Come in.
So, hit any snags along the way?
There always are. Handle them.
You're real tough as nails, huh? That's how you survive out there. All right, now hand over those scrolls already. Choppity chop chop, huh?
These scrolls are for some kind of investigation, right?
Mm-hmm. Real big stink, mind you. But thanks to your help, I can give it a push.
Here, take them.
Great work. I'll spread the word you do solid merc work. Coming from Aaron McCarlson, that'll go far.
I'm sure it will. Take care.
Hello, Deluded Daybreak. Not to be outdone, so Lord Gloom. These are. It's funny that Lord Gloom and Deluded Daybreak seem to keep showing up roughly around the same time because they both found me through Brace Yourself games. As on that note, by the way, I feel like I should mention there was an announcement for Phantom Brigade about a new batch of features that they're adding. So there's a new kind of combat type, which I'm rather intrigued to see. But anyways, two streamers, definitely lots of fun to have inside the channel, but also have good...
Aaron's happy. I'm happy. Always pays to be on good terms with badges, right? Gigs closed. Eddie's on their way.
Two good streamers in their own right, who I definitely recommend checking out. Now, I was going to say, Deluded, I know that you were going to... I did see that you were doing Rift of the Necrodancer tonight. I was getting ready to stream, so I'm sorry I didn't stop by and say hi. But I am curious. I know you were going for another milestone or another record or whatever the appropriate term would be. Did you make it?
Ready to roll or what?
Ah, sorry to hear it. But that's just another opportunity for me to see you hit the next one. Oh, that's great! Yeah, for those of you not familiar, Deluded Daybreak will do... I feel like I can't abbreviate Deluded Daybreak to Deluded, it's especially when talking about achievements. But Deluded Daybreak does Rift of the Necrodancer with aplomb. So I definitely enjoy the game, and like to a certain extent... you know what? I'm not playing this game to obey traffic laws. But yeah, for Deluded Daybreak, like for me, I can play Rift of the Necrodancer, and it is sufficient for me to sort of wiggle my tush in my chair, and that, you know, I'm having a good time. But to see Deluded play this, it's like, okay, no, I now appreciate, you know, I know what those people at the top of the leaderboards look like. You know, these are people who play this game in a way that I don't think I will ever be able to appreciate myself. And I actually really like that. So it's not, you know, to me, I've never really conceived of the Crypt of the Necrodancer games, or maybe I should say Necrodancer games was maybe the more appropriate label. I personally have never conceived of them that way, but very clearly they put a lot of effort into making sure that people can play and appreciate them that way. So that's one of the things I quite like specifically about Deluded's stream, is that it gives me a perspective on a game series that I'm very fond of, but one that maybe I didn't quite appreciate from that angle until watching their stuff.
Hey V, wanna do a good deed and make some eddies while you're at it? Gotta get someone out of the Tiger Claw's grip before they chop him into teeny tiny little pieces. You in? Deed's attached. Don't make me ask twice.
All right, I think what I'll do is I'll do this mission, and then I'm going to take a small break for myself. So SOS Merc needed. Roshi 1, Tiger Claw's dojo on Brooklyn Street. Matters urgent. My client, Masadu Coolidge, or maybe McAdoo Coolidge. You might recognize him from his show Boxathon on N54 from a few years back, is looking for someone to get his coach back from the Tiger Claws. Here's the deal. Masadu got himself into a debt hole. Looking to climb out the easy way, he cut a deal with the Tigers. They gave him a wad of cash to go down in the next fight. And what did he do with it? He goes to the bookie incognito, bets on his own win. Next thing you know, he KOs his opponent in the second round, and blasts off into the sunset with an AV. It was happily ever after for Masadu until they kidnapped his coach, Rochi Wan. They're threatening to kill him if Masadu doesn't come back to Night City. Masadu doesn't want his coach's death to weigh on his conscience, so he got in touch with me, and I got in touch with you, sending you the cords where they're keeping Rochi Wan. Try getting him without tripping the alarm. Hostages and shootouts don't mix well. Good luck. You're accumulating rivals. People throw challenges your way in your chat. You actually added a proper challenge option. Oh, that's wonderful. Sorry, I should save like this. So yeah, I remember this one was a challenge to do without an alarm, but I think I can pull it off. If I recall correctly, I think there was also a... I think there was another section of the Iliad in here. Alright, so... see what I've got to work with before I go too far. I seem to remember going from the roof created a challenge. Yoink. Oh, I'm looking forward to this. Okay. So I need a 7A55. Both of those will work, but then I need a 7A after. Then I need a 1C, but I've already committed myself, so... but that works out. Odyssey sounds a lot like Odyssey, but clearly no one told Polyphemus. And if you don't get that joke, get thee to a library. No, that's a good one. Have you Have you told that one before, Deluded, or was that a System Chalk channel original? Either way, that provoked a genuine smirk. Ah, very nice. There's actually a neat there's a neat little introduction to my Norton anthology of world literature. So when I was in university, like I think any arts program, possibly it's possibly a breadth requirement for everything, but basically there was an expectation that I would take a certain number of credits of English, which I was happy to do. There were definitely a couple of courses which I definitely felt that I got a lower grade because I didn't happen to share the prof's views on the Vancouver housing market. But, you know, like to me, I like literature too much to let that, get in the way of my, my enjoyment, let's say. So, okay. So I'm definitely going to need to be very careful with the cameras. But I did more like early English, so essentially Beowulf, Canterbury Tales, everything up to Milton. But one of the things that's kind of nice, so there's like a standard text. Some courses may use something different, but kind of the standard text that you'll see inside of English classes will be the Norton Anthology of Literature. And of course, because basically every student that does like it feels like there's two classes that basically every student in a North American university has to, sorry, I shouldn't say North American, but like Canadian or US university needs to learn. And that's English and calculus. Like it just, I'm sure there are people who don't need to, but it feels like those are the two that you have to learn whether you want to or not. I think it'd be better to learn linear algebra personally, but you know, I'm sure nobody should really be asking me for math advice, and nobody is. But yeah, so the thing that's kind of nice about the Norton Anthology of Literature, because basically everyone needs to get it, and most people sell their textbooks at the end of the semester, and there's new editions that Norton comes out with. You can actually get the full Norton Anthology for a very low cost if you're willing to either go for an old edition or used or what have you. So I do have the full collection now. I've not read through all of it because it's quite large. But one thing that a friend of mine said, like they pointed out that they actually preferred world literature. Because, you know, they had gone through high school and they had done, you know, actually they basically took the same English classes that I did. So both honors English and English Lit. So, you know, you've got Byron and Shakespeare and, you know, it's all, you know, the usual suspects, let's say. But he hadn't necessarily been exposed to, you know, a lot of other really wonderful writing that isn't English. So, you know, he made the point. Now, I asked him about it again, and he didn't remember making that recommendation, so I didn't have a whole lot to go on there. But basically, I thought he had a point. And there was a Goethe book that I picked up, which also talked a bit about world literature. And of course, he would count, right, because he's writing in German. So I sort of thought, yeah, you know, I'll do the same trick, right? Because, you know, it may not be the same kind of prerequisite, but there's going to be a bunch of people going through English classes, and there's going to be used copies. And sure enough, I mean, there's a couple of slightly expensive ones, but in the end, I wound up with the the Norton as well, and that one actually begins with the story of the Cyclops, and gives kind of an interesting interpretation on it, which I hadn't encountered before. So it's always funny when that kind of keeps creeping up. All right, I think I'm just gonna you only YOLO once it, although I would love a BD. So so BD 7A E9 55. So one version I've done of this actually clears out the... Whoa! I'm a fool. Maybe I should just sneak the guy out this time. Yoink. Kick his ass for a bit while I steal some money, okay? Alright, Speedy 21Cs. Don't have it. So double 55 E9. All right, I'm a bit surprised. I don't. No, there we go. 55. Oh no, hang on. Yeah, I'm missing that as well. But I can probably do a double 55 and a BD, and then transfer that. So 55, 55 BD. Then I need the 21C, so that's not it. Well, I'll be. Huh. So if I do 55, 55, E9, where I want to go with that is a BD. So if I do that BD, I don't get the 1C. If I do that BD... Oh, hang on. So BD, 1C, 1C. Oh, yeah. No, that works. You're waiting for a simulation to finish right now. You are optimizing a design that you had to completely restart today. It turns out that your first go had some slightly misaligned cuts that made further modifying the part impossible. Interesting. So sorry, Deluded, this may be an appallingly stupid question, but what exactly do you simulate in terms of what you're doing? MMA tournament, all moves permitted. Racy Rob, the executor, Masadu Coolidge, enter bet, win. Blood and adrenaline guaranteed.
You row? Yup. That's me. I was hired to get you out of here. Can you walk?
Interrogation transcript. Where's Coolidge? Inside. Inside where? Your mom. Very fucking funny. Rochi1 screams in pain. I'll ask you again. Where the fuck is he? Hold on. I have to I have to check. Yeah, he's still in your mom. That's it. She wants screams and whimpers. Not so funny now, huh? Let's talk. Where's Coolidge? And not another word about my mom. Okay, I'm done. Smart move. So, he's in the other hole now. Motherfucker! Rochiwan bellows in pain.
Man, I've got 43 fights under my belt. This isn't my first black and blue makeover. Say the word, and I'm right behind you.
Okay, then get up. Time to turn tail.
With you all the way. Listen, if we run into trouble, I can't help you. At least, not in this state.
I'll handle it. It's what I'm paid for.
Transport's outside. So yeah, previous one that I did, I sort of ran through the level and looted it, but... So use a computer-aided design to make a race car rim and to figure out where you can shave off more material. I'm using a calculation suite called ANSYS. Once the calculation is done, I modify the design, then repeat the process. Slowly, I'm able to shave off materials to approximate the best possible wheel. Very cool. I was actually going to ask the next one, I was like, are you using like Simulink or something like that? But I've just outed myself as a poser. Just grab your snack, I don't care.
All over now. You better Delta.
Let's put this whole thing to rest. Thanks. I think I can take it from here.
I'm sure you will.
Hey, listen. By the way, who threw down the eddies to bust me out?
Massadoo. He knew you'd be in a bit of a fix after the stunt he pulled.
Just like him to do that. First he lends me knee-deep in shit, then tries to pull me out.
You sure you're gonna be okay?
I should spit in his face when shake his hand when I see him now.
It'd be better for both of you if you never saw each other again. Ever.
You're on the level. Don't let this city swallow you up. And if it does, make sure it remembers you.
Sig reached me that road's secured. Can't say I'm not impressed. You handled it like a real pro. Closing the gig. Sending the eds.
P.S. I tossed in a little well-deserved bonus at the closest drop point. Enjoy. Alright, so... let's run ahead. So yeah, like I said, after that mission, it went a little shorter than I was expecting, but I am going to take a minute after the mission. I've been streaming for about 2 hours now, and I've definitely had... I was doing a lot of sitting today, so I don't think it would hurt to actually just get up and have a proper stretch. I'll try and keep the break reasonably short, although I know if ever I'm making tea or something like that, there's usually a bit of a wait. Yeah, whoa! You know what, at this point... Alright, so I accidentally hit a civilian. You saw nothing, lady. Guess the firefight's over. The whole approach handles finite element analysis of speed and complexity that would be prohibitively tedious by hand. See, whenever you discuss the... this is kind of true for everybody's subject. Not that I want to make you feel, not special or anything, but whenever people describe some of the stuff that they're working on in their own fields, it always sounds so incredibly cool, and it makes me feel like I really wasted my time in school not studying the stuff that they're doing. So now you mentioned sorry, it's called ANSYS. Is that like a commercial piece of software, or is that like is that a standard tool that's kind of available to anyone? I know it's a mix in terms of different faculties, so like if you're in econ, the standard is usually Stata, which is a commercial product. But if you're in, like, I don't know, poli-sci or psych, I think they tend to focus a lot more on R, which is free and open source and also horrible to use. So that may not be the assessment of everybody who uses R, by the way. But cool. Yeah. There's one of the reasons I ask is, I don't know if you've ever played any of the Zachtronic games, but in Last Call BBS, there's a kind of like circuit design program, and like the idea behind it is it's a cracked piece of commercial software. But yeah, exactly. But yeah, so one of them is sort of like, it's the idea. You can get from the name, right? Like Last Call BBS. So this idea that you've gone onto this BBS, which is maybe hosting some software that shouldn't necessarily be there. And instead of it being like, I don't know, a cracked version of Photoshop or something like that, it's this kind of this CAD tool, which are turned into a bunch of puzzles. I really liked Last Call. In general, all the Zachtronics games are really enjoyable. I think there's something really special about Opus Magnum. I really, really like Exapunks. Exapunks might be... I don't know, it's kind of like asking me what my favorite Kubrick film is. Like, it's going to change each time I'm asked, but Exapunks is really high up there on my list of Zachtronics favorites. And, but yeah, Last Call BBS, I'm not going to lie. Like, I was sorry to see it go in its current form. However, I think the new project he's working on is called Coincidence, and they've done a couple of physical card games. And definitely the interview I heard with Zach Barth was that he seemed to be happier doing what he was doing. So it's one of these things, right, where you may have a creator whose stuff you really like, but you never want that to... You don't want to feel like they're kind of doing they're like this infinite slave because they made a game that people like. They're now committed to this path forever. But I like that they seem to have found a form that lets them lets them make the stuff that they're well known for in a way that's taken away some of the pressures that they might have been feeling in the old Zachtronics model. Okay, 2 quasars. This one has more slots. All right, that's enough of that. So I'm going to try and... So I'll try and make it a brief break. But again, some of this is contingent on things like kettles. If you've been here since the start, or maybe even if you haven't been, I encourage you to get up, have a stretch. Otherwise, take care of, excuse me, yourself. And, oh, your computer's getting very warm. Is it a space heater now? Anyways, I realize I don't have a whole lot of time left in the stream, so like I said, I'll try and keep this relatively brief. But I do just need to kind of get up and move around for a little bit before I carry on, however long that is. I encourage you to maybe get up and do the same, and then we'll be back to do at least one or two more missions. But until then, I will see you after the break. Okay, sorry about the wait for that. I do have my tea, but I will also confess this is gonna make me sound like a million years old, but I'm a little creaky. I I did a new exercise sort of I set a reminder for Apple Fitness Plus, which has an appalling number of squats, and then I I also walked. God, I don't even want to get many kilometers today. And like it's because it was a nice day, and like one of the things that I do, I'm bad at regularly doing exercise. It's one of the reasons why I like Apple Fitness Plus is it's a nice mechanism. I'm already sort of fully in the Apple ecosystem, so it's just it's just a natural thing to sort of fill the rings and all of that. I am one of those bozos that does, fall for that sort of thing. But the thing is that like Apple Fitness Plus, it's, a bunch of impossibly charismatic and fit people, smiling while they get you to do these horrible things to your body. And my more natural way of quote unquote exercising is I just like walking everywhere. It is not a big thing for me to you'll go into your Maps app or whatever and it'll just like automatically say, oh yeah, you're going that far away, you want to drive. It's like, nope. I don't even have a car, just I'm walking there. And it's a problem. Like I'm obviously quite busy, so it is a challenge because I blow out a couple of hours a day just walking, but it's a nice way. If you put on a podcast, if you can't stand being trapped with your thoughts, or just have a thought. If it's a park, having a book with you is not a bad idea. I really enjoy walking, but I did find today the combination of the appalling number of squats over the last few days, combined with an unusually large amount of walking because it's a really nice day today, and that is actually really starting to catch up with me. So I kind of got up, made the tea, and then just like kind of lay down for a little bit and tried to stretch, and then wondered if stretching was like a good idea or not, and then heard the tea boil and was like, okay, I'll just stay back here for a little bit. I was like, no, I gotta get up. But the tea, I actually have like a little bit of a mist underneath. So anyways, I'm a bit of a wreck right now, but that's fine. It's like part of it is just getting back into the routine. I know I pushed myself a little bit more than I should for somebody who basically stopped doing any physical activity over winter. And like I said, I just feel like a creaky million-year-old man now. All right, new contracts hot and ready, almost in the major leagues now. V, feel free to take a day off. You've earned it. Sorry to subject you all to the backside for so long in the background. But yeah, no, I love walking. It's kind of nice too because I'm not like what I would consider to be walking distance. I've got the War Museum, the History Museum, and the Art Gallery, all of which I have memberships for. And they're all, as long as I'm within, visiting hours, I can walk to any and all of them. In reality, I'll probably just go to one for the day because they, they're not small. Maniac. But again, it's just one of these things where I'd like to visit them more than I do, and it's partly a time thing. Although I think the library at the War Museum isn't available on weekends. I think you have to go there on a weekday. Maybe something for me to do on a vacation day or something. Oh, I remember this one. I think this is Regina Jones' ex.
V, guy named Max Jones needs help. He might disagree, but if you don't get to this stubborn gomp first, he's as good as dead. Max is a media and a good friend of mine. Need you to bring him to me. If he puts up a fight, you're cleared to use force. Like I said, he's stubborn. Deets attached.
Oh, you know what? I don't think it ever actually settles whether or not the Jones is the same. So, anyways, SOS Merc needed. Rescue Max and bring him to me. The old broadcast TV in Northside. Night City doesn't like people that like to kick the hornet's nest. And Max Jones, well, he kicked a bunch of them at the same time. Kicked him so hard, in fact, that someone put a hit out on him. Thing is, personally, I'd rather he stayed alive. Max Jones is an old friend from my muckraking days. We co-wrote a vidcast about independent farmers who were put out of biz by Biotechnica drones. Those were the days. Nowadays, Max doesn't even take my calls. He's as stubborn as they come, but now I'm worried he's really lost touch with reality. He probably thinks he can manage perfectly fine on his own, but that's what all young gonk men think. Think they're invincible. Bring him to reason, will you? Sending you the cords to his hideout. If I manage to track him down, it's only a matter of time until the others do. Okay, 2 FFs and a BD. And then can I get the E9 FF? So I have FF1C. I've got 2 7As I can do here. I'd like an FF afterwards. This is the only one that gets me an FF. Unfortunately, it doesn't get me the 50. Oh, no, it does. But I don't think it gets me the follow-up FF. There we go. Oh, shoot. Let's just try that again. This is even worse. All right. 2 1Cs and then a 55. Okay. Credits outro. Presenter Nellie Bly, publisher Regina Jones, editors Magdalena Baggi, Matthew Malinowski, Matt Dunal, Charlize Barton, Max Jones, Paul Kowalski, Florence Avital, graphics Viola Barton, and Kim Allen. Teleprompter Archive, World News Service. It's 7 p.m. on the 6th of June 2070, and I'm Nellie Bly coming to you live from the World News Service. Today's biggest stories include further casualties from the war as Sacramento was carpet-bombed last night. The USSR has also sent humanitarian aid to Night City. Independent observers claim it's, quote, not humanitarian aid, only trucks full of weapons. The Free State of Texas has officially closed its borders to refugees from Night City. It's 7 p.m. on the 24th of October, 2074, and I'm Nellie Bly coming to you live from the World News Service. Major stories today include a cyber psycho attack in Kabuki in which 3 people have died. An earthquake in Italy has killed an estimated 98 people. President Myers has offered to help protect Night citizens with Militech forces, though her words were sharply criticized by the Night City Police Commissioner. And let's do a remote takeover. Now, I think turrets work differently now. I should probably ping before I could commit too much. All right, so one last thing. Oh, can't ping it. So yeah, more of these things I can disarm, the happier I'll be. I don't know how I feel about I will settle for this, but I think I've got some more cleanup to do. Speaking of cleanup.
From a grenade tore straight through my thigh. Me? I got blown up. Improvised explosive device. We're barely out of the ICU when they rolled up. Cameras scrolling, fresh footage from the court. Put our faces on TV, told us what to say.
Okay, bunch of 7As and then a BD. Yeah, you know what? We will do this on vibes. Yeah, so for all the time I spend on these things, the last few times I've done the vibes once, it's actually turned out pretty well.
That's right. They gave us Nova implants, pre-med care, even the big cats from the board showed up.
Oops. Pathfinder, half a century of silence. When in the summer of 2020, NASA's Pathfinder mission set off for Jupiter, it was the buzz of every radio station, TV media outlet, and scream sheet. Stills of the crew were plastered on every type of commemorative merchandise imaginable. Mugs, shirts, plates, bobbleheads, bumper stickers, the list goes on. But just a week later, the steady stream of information dried to a trickle. A month later, the world had all but forgotten them. 3 years later, and 2 years before their planned entry into Jupiter's orbit, a conflict, now known as the Fourth Corporate War, broke out. Cape Canaveral was one of the first strategic sites razed to the ground, NASA's Mission Control Center along with it. Pathfinder, in the vast reaches of space, had been cut off. When the opposing sides finally signed a truce 3 years later, Militech set its sights on re-establishing contact with the Pathfinder crew, but to no avail. Pathfinder's signal, it seemed, had been swallowed by the void of the Big Black. To this day, it remains unknown whether the Pathfinder mission was a success. If its crew ever did reach Jupiter and its moons, we have received no word, no data, and not a single lead to follow. Maybe they never stood a chance. Maybe, after half a century of silence, they simply have nothing to say to us. Which is something of an intriguing idea on its... I mean, I'm assuming you would have to have some kind of...
Up their cameras and forgot all about you. Yeah. And get this. Those implants, we had to give them back. Replaced them with these first-gen pieces of garbage. They did us dirty, yo. Took everything from us, tossed us like... It's okay. I understand.
I do like the way the lights are sort of positioned in the level. I'm not sure it's fully... I'm not sure it's kind of fully designed to protect, the idea of the entry to sort of a kind of a kill zone, just putting the spotlights to disorient the target, but it kind of feels hastily built that way, maybe.
You a corpo? Tell me, or I shoot. Max, drop that iron. Let's talk. No! You assholes won't take me alive.
Whoa! I kind of want to redo this one. I'm sorry, I really should commit more to my decisions, but... I didn't realize it was possible to sort of fail the job.
Okay. I understand.
Anyways, fortunately we're kind of close to the...
You a corpo? Tell me, or I shoot.
Not a fucking suit. Name's V. Regina sent me.
Regina. Tell her she can get fucked.
That loaded.
Oh, right. He wordlessly fires the thing in the air.
Why the suicide threats, huh?
Thought you were a corpo. Sent to silence me.
So you would have died anyway.
But on my own terms. The bastards control everything. But me, I get to decide when I go. I do. Tell Regina that, too. Not gonna break, not like her.
Heard your interview on the way up.
Started broadcasting the moment you showed up on the feed. It wasn't finished, not like I wanted it, but at least people got the truth.
There's a death warrant out for you. But you probably already knew that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I could give a shit too. But Regina wants to help you out.
Help me out? She's the one who needs help. She was the best media I knew. Shit, she was my mentor. And now? Sold right out. But I won't be bought. Not me.
Regina was your mentor?
Not just mine. She was the best war reporter in Night City.
But then she turned fixer.
Yeah, like I said. Sold out. Things used to be different. The media's word fucking meant something. We tracked those sons of bitches every dirty move. And now, you can prove Halt's in Arasaka's pocket, and nobody gives a flying turd fuck.
So why do that veteran piece? If we're all so fresh out of fucks to give.
So that people start asking questions. Start wondering. Just like you, now. Maybe that little grain of discomfort will grow into dissent. Who knows? I figure it's worth a try.
You think you're hot shit, but you might as well be a fly buzzing in a corpo's ear.
So I'll keep buzzing.
It's not medias they're losing sleep over. It's fixers with razor-sharp intel. The kind that'll slit your throat.
Yeah, because I'm sure Regina's the one keeping Yorinobu up at night.
You got an itch for the truth, don't you? If you want to know who Regina is now, what she really fights for, just go and see her.
Mm-hmm.
At the very least, it'd mean a lot to her. Max?
I'll talk to her, but that's it.
That's all I ask.
Okay, just gotta download a few things.
Do what you gotta do.
Inside Metacorp, we associate nomads with chaos, societal collapse, technological backwardness, and for good reason. But there are always exceptions to the rule, and for the nomads, that exception are the meta, more specifically Metacorp. Unlike other nomad groups that deal in smuggling and raiding, the Meta are strictly law-abiding. Metacorp, formally registered in the Western corporate states, is a majority stakeholder in numerous shipping companies, including the rapidly growing DTR, Decker, Tanaka, and Rogers, which handled 53% of all America's transport last year. The story of Metacorp is a story of American entrepreneurial spirit and confidence in the future, two things that not even a nuclear war could destroy. Indeed, Metacorp only proves that a new order can rise out of entropy, that the rustle of eurodollars is capable of civilizing even the most savage barbarians. Last month, I had an opportunity to visit the company's headquarters in Meta Key, a mobile island currently anchored in the Gulf of Mexico. There I met Victoria Meta, the corporation's nomad CEO and granddaughter of Metacorp's founder, Jonathan Meta. Victoria had clearly inherited his steely gaze and enterprising mind. Car's waiting for you. Do not ignore this message. Regina Jones, Max Jones. Max, a job just came through and there is a very big price on your head. Someone already took it. This isn't a fucking joke. You could be killed. Let me help you. Come to my place and I'll give you somewhere to hide until things quiet down. And listen, I know you still have a grudge against me, not without good reason, but the time has come to put all that aside, okay? Above all else, we're friends, even if our lives went in different directions. And remember, we have more in common, and I don't just mean our last names, than you think. Max, I'm begging you, pick up the holo. So, I guess in this case, it's just the similarity of last names. Something to chew on. Hello, I'm contacting you about a matter that might be of interest to you concerning war veterans. I have evidence that the In Blood We Serve was nothing but a clever gimmick. The campaign's main goal was to help veterans, and indeed they were given help, but only temporarily. Allow me to explain. Soldiers who lost their limbs while in active duty were chipped with Prem-tier implants. The problem was that after 6 months, they had to give them back to the corporation. Their veterans' allowance, which was meant to last indefinitely, was also taken away. I have proof of this, documents, stills, etc. I can also put you in touch with the veterans involved. I'll send it all in 48 hours. Sound interesting? Why me? And why do you want this information to come to light? What's in it for you? We had an interview once. You were an honest vulture. I know it. As for my reasons, let's just say I have them and leave it at that. I'd rather focus on what I'm telling you is true and that good people were exploited. Tomorrow I'll start transferring the files on the In Blood We Serve program. Can't remember if the bounty hunter shows up or if we just run out and get clear. Guess we get clear.
Chauffeur, what's next? Champagne? Black market synth cigars?
No time to waste. Let's go.
Take care, Max.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, I don't know. I keep coming back to this. Like, one of the things I always find kind of fun about...
Thanks for the help. Glad you got through to that stubborn mule. Looks like I'm up to bat with him now. Gig closed.
Thanks again for handling the issue in good faith. I'm tossing in a little extra. You can collect it at the drop point. I think one of the things that I always keep coming back to on Night City, and this kind of comes back to talking about sort of picking topics to write on, right? So whether you want to learn about something, whether you have something that's kind of bugging you and you want to express it, it seems that a lot of fiction, it's nice if you can do that in a way that isn't preachy. So if you again, whatever's bugging you, you don't just make it literally about that. I'm just gonna trash some stuff. Okay, I was actually looking for anything that didn't have the tier 5 on it, but there wasn't any. So I'll start walking towards the next mission, but I think we'll wrap up for tonight, and I just want to finish the thought. But yeah, so the negative example I can give is that I do try to get involved with writer groups where I can. It's partly it's just nice to have, you know, the encouragement. I do personally find it sort of helpful to be impressed and even envious of local talent. This is why some of the AI trouble in the local group was so discouraging, because there's some definitely really talented people in the group, and so where I can, I would very much prefer to focus on that rather than, you know, somebody with a personal issue with me. But what I really remember about one group in Vancouver was that there were people who like ostensibly it was a group of writers who wanted to write screenplays, but I remember every time that they would meet, they'd always be talking about like Slavoj Žižek, and it would just sort of feel like I was sitting in like a critical theory course, and there would never be, like, I'd be the only one who'd written anything, which again, fair enough, right? And in this particular group, it was somebody who I knew from like elementary school, and they had turned out to move to Vancouver. I didn't realize this, but you know, we reconnected, and it was her boyfriend. But like, this guy wound up being, I guess the diplomatic way of putting it would be, a bit of a character. But what really amused me was I did finally see, so I've talked about this movie a lot, but there's a movie I really like from the late 70s called Network. And if you haven't seen it, it is a hell of a film. It has only gotten more relevant every year that it's been out. Written by Padej Chayefsky, who sort of worked in the golden age of television, first golden age of television. And it is a satire like no other. And anyway, recommended it. They watched it, really liked it, and in fact, as far as he was concerned, it was like, this film is exactly like something I've written. I was like, oh, this is very encouraging. So he shares it, and I take a look, and I kid you not, this is a script about. He used to work at eBay. And this was a script basically about how everyone but this guy was stupid. Like, some of you may have seen this meme where like Homer's sitting back with a cigar saying, everybody's stupid but me. It was that, the screenplay, right? I could tell he didn't like his boss. His boss is this like caricature. Everybody he runs into is like physically deformed and stupid, and he always has a clever line, and he basically kind of causes a global revolution around how people shouldn't have to work crappy jobs. And it's like, it would be embarrassing if it wasn't so inept and so unintentionally hilarious, is kind of the only way I can describe it. I think I may actually have a copy of it on an old hard drive still. But it would feel a little inappropriate to read that out, right? Like, I actually did write a parody of it because I'm a jerk. But I don't know, it would feel kind of inappropriate to read the actual script itself on stream or something. The guy really was a dick, though, so I'm debating on it, but it probably is a bridge too far to do it. God, why did I even start telling this story? Oh, right, yeah. So, the things that motivate you. So, ideally, I guess for me, having seen an example of that, I'm like, okay, I know I don't want to write that, I can do, I've done my fair share of, not being too impressed at people's reaction to the Unity announcements. And so, maybe a couple of those might be a bit, everybody's stupid but me coded. But I don't know. I feel at least I'm not coming right out and saying that. And apparently you can't take that for granted for everything. So, why can't I move forward? So yeah, needless to say, it's not that you can't write that. You can write anything, but ideally what you are doing if you're writing something is you are being clever, and you are encoding that message into something that resembles entertainment. And this can work for comedy, this can work for horror, this can work for science fiction. There's so many wonderful stories that come out of the idea of, it's pretty weird that this thing is happening, or it's pretty upsetting that this thing is happening, and I'm bothered by it, but I know you're not going to want to hear a rant about it, so here's a weird story about, aliens or whatever. So in the case of Cyberpunk, right, like, this isn't Los Angeles, and you know, the characters aren't movie stars, but it's all about fame and trying to break through and try, you know, what messages people are listening into and how do you build your reputation and things like that. And especially when the setting has things like, you know, the poser gangs and, you know, all of these others, like, and especially if you've seen, I don't think it would have been out at the time that that Cyberpunk 2020 was first conceived, but if you've ever watched the movie Strange Days, it definitely lines up a lot, or at least some parts of it really line up a lot with this setting. So, you know, again, I can't say for sure. I definitely don't think it's CD Projekt Red that's necessarily just putting this in. I think if anything, they're just responding to certain ideas that are present in the setting. But yeah, I definitely feel like they're, to a certain degree, the whole Cyberpunk 2020 setting. Like, this is, sorry, I know I'm going to sound tedious saying this, but like, to me, it is another example about how well the Grand Theft Auto 5 style like fits for this. And again, I don't necessarily think this is a deliberate choice. I just happen to think that it's lined up well enough to work. So, you know, again, Grand Theft Auto 5, you know, it has a satire on a few different things, but definitely it does take place in Hollywood, and there are some people who, you know, want to be famous or at least want to be part of that world, and definitely it is making fun of, at the very least, stars who were stars at that time. Obviously that is quite an old game now, so some of the, you know, some of the contemporary references maybe are a little dated for that, but I think most people kind of get at least an idea of who's being referred to. Hey, Joshy man, how you doing? Today's episode of CBC, we have Cyberpunk 2077, the Fixer's Pet. I will just caution you, Joshy man, I've gone on my last mission today, but I'm sort of wrapping up with a few ideas, trying to do some bookends on some ideas that we talked about today. But yeah, so, you know, I think probably if you want to make a game, a successful big game, you know, following in the style of Grand Theft Auto 5 isn't a bad one. It's not to suggest that Cyberpunk 2077 is not its own thing, but I think there's probably enough going on in there to say that if you like, do you like Grand Theft Auto 5? Well, you like Cyberpunk. But the thing is that because I do think ideas of fame and these kinds of priorities, characters who are pursuing it, again, you know, never fade away is another example of that. And I think Cyberpunk handles these themes in interesting ways, right? So this idea of, you know, this type of immortality that maybe isn't earned or you know, is inappropriate, contrasting both Saburo and Johnny, and not necessarily seeing that as a purely positive thing, I think is interesting. And, you know, wrapping that up in Cyberpunk, which again, because it is a set of larger-than-life characters who are either pursuing that goal or at the very least are in an environment informed by that, whether or not that, you know, it's hard to see taking the style of Grand Theft Auto 5 and mapping that onto Cyberpunk. I don't really think that's necessarily a fame thing, but I do think that there's something kind of interesting about the fact that both of them actually seem to have there's a subset of issues that both of those games that are dealing with that actually tend to complement each other quite well. Which is weird. You don't necessarily think, you wouldn't sit down and say Grand Theft Auto 5 and Cyberpunk 2077 are both united by their handling of the idea of sort of fame and just generally the sort of things that you think about when people are thinking about Hollywood. But the more I play through it and the more I kind of think about it, I'm like, you know, there's probably something to that. but maybe something we will handle in a future future setting. Because all I really wanted to say on that one was, you know, if you want to rant about influencers, if you want to rant about celebrity, you can, but nobody will listen. But if you wrap it up in a, you know, an environment where everything has to be turned up to 11 to have an impact, or if you are doing this, you know, in the case of Grand Theft Auto 5, these almost borderline tragic characters in some cases in their pursuit of attention, or, you know, the trappings of fame. Again, they wind up being very good hosts for these, you know, not necessarily positive views on some of the priorities that people have today. Like, again, it's kind of the thing I like about Grand Theft Auto 5 and Cyberpunk 2077 is that while it's not explicit, deep down you can really just say, you know, and this is why you shouldn't aspire to be an influencer. And I say this because one of my coworkers has a kid, and apparently they want to become an influencer now. And I'm like, I guess I'm kind of glad I'm not a parent. You know, there's a side of me that says it's just the, you know, it's the 2025 version of wanting to have like a garage band, or, you know, or to be a movie star or whatever. You know, there's obviously every generation of parents is just going to be like, oh God, you know, these children are feral. What are we going to do? You know, we have no hope, you know. And it's, you know, it'll all turn out. But I don't know. I feel like there are probably, I guess, I don't know. This is, again, going to make me sound a million years old, but I'm not going to say that there is no skill to being an influencer. There's no skill to like what I do, but, you know, to be an honest to God influencer that actually makes a living off of this, you'd have to be pretty blind to say that there's no skill to doing that. But I guess if you're acting, or if you are a musician, there is at least some basic level of talent required for that, and I don't know if that's true for influencers. You know, like the thing is that there's been a lot of musicians that people really like to hate on, but even when you look at some of the ones that people sort of universally regard as hacks, if you actually look at what they can do, they generally can play multiple instruments at a fairly high level. So you may not necessarily like the music. But these are definitely pretty hard-working people who have you know, put in the work. And, you know, likewise for actors, you know, in Vancouver isn't exactly the place where you become a star. And I can remember I met one of my old managers on a film set. I was in the camera department. They were an extra. And it was great. Like, they weren't a bad manager, so I had you know, a great time kind of catching up with them during one of the breaks. But yeah, like, you know, this is, you know, they had an acting dream, and they, you know, they worked crappy jobs so they could go and work the crappy acting job. And so, you know, I also happen to know that they actually did have some legitimate acting talent too, but, you know, they doesn't necessarily mean that they were getting those roles. So yeah, I don't know. That's where I get to be a bit of an old. I was from Vancouver, yes, but I'm not in Vancouver now. But yeah, so it's I'm in Ottawa now, which is pretty far away from any film production. But yeah, I don't know. It was a fun. It's one of these ones, you know, like I said, it's really just a chance for me to do my old man rant to say, like, influencers don't have any talent, and, you know, they should become musicians. No, it's a different set of skills. I'm maybe not entirely convinced that what the world needs is another batch of people whose only real skill is I guess, persuasion, for lack of a better term, or sort of the appearance of. So, like, you know, there's a lot of. I guess the thing I would say is, and this is kind of violating the kind of sympathy I would normally expect for people with Sturgeon's Law and science fiction, right? You know, 90% of science fiction is crap, but that's, you know, roughly the proportion for anything. You know, 90% of anything is crap. So, but I don't know. It's sort of this idea that, you know, marketing or rhetoric. Actually, you know what? This is as old as Plato, right? The sophists. You know, damn them, the only thing that they know is the power of persuasion, but you need substance behind it. And again, if you take something of a sympathetic reading of the sophists, you can see that there is actually more going on there. But on the other hand, I have also seen finance TikTok, and that is an absolute nightmare. I do know a thing or two about finance, and I think there are a lot of people who will be in a considerably worse financial place entirely because someone wanted to be famous and said a bunch of bullshit that does, you know, sounds really good and will definitely not help them. So, and I don't know if there's a science fiction book that made someone make bad financial decisions. Anyways, on that happy note, have a good night, everybody. Let's find somebody to host. Diluted Daybreak. It is now up to you to take the mantle of a science influencer. Teach us how to do good simulations. Who is online tonight? Not too many people, but I do see that Kilgore Trout is currently doing Star Trek Elite Force 2, or if I misread Roman numerals, 11. Well, step one is not to make the mistake I did earlier. So is it still running? I'm assuming not, but yeah, Kilgore Trout is somebody who streams. He's part of the GOG stream team. He tends to stream a lot of classic games and on original hardware. So he's got a couple of old PCs set up running an old version of Windows. Doesn't always do it. Sometimes he'll run stuff through DOSBox as well. But definitely an interesting guy. I played a lot of this stuff when it first came out, so I kind of get an appreciation for these games that maybe I didn't get a chance to play when they came out, or in fact play at all. But he is a... well, at least it works well in space. Actually, I don't think that works out. Anyways, you know, it's too late to be talking about this stuff. But I will be back on Monday. I think we're more likely to wrap up I'm pretty sure we'll wrap up Hellblade 2 on Monday. Wednesday, I think I might try, if we finish that early, and on Wednesday, I think I might do Ace Attorney. I'm not 100% on that, though. I'll write it out when I figure it out. But anyways, I don't have that much time. Enjoy Kilgore's Trout. Joshy Man, thank you very much for the subscription. Sorry to be running off with that. I appreciate it. I hope I get a chance to catch up with you next stream.